Testing 1, 2, testing.
Yeah. Please be seated. Good evening. Before we start, I'd like to start with a minute's silence. Before we start the business of the evening, a member has suggested we hold 1 minute silence in memory of Ruth Perry, and I think it is appropriate to do so. Ruth Perry was the head of Caversham Primary School in Reading, which I attended as a young child. On the 8th of January, took her own life. We will never fully know what drove her to this drastic action. However, according to the media, she may well have been under extreme stress related to a pending Ofsted report, which she had been told would be significantly downgraded from all her previous ones. It is not relevant tonight to discuss the operation of the school inspection regime. I'm sure I speak for the whole council when I say we wish to record our respect for a neighbouring community leader who has succumbed to the pressure of the systems. Would you please rise for 1 minute? Thank you. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council. My name is Councillor Caroline Smith. I'm the Mayor of Wokingham and will chair this meeting. Before we start, I would like to go through a few preliminaries. Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. A reminder that members do need to stand when speaking to the Chamber, and may I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timing set out in the Constitution. Thank you. Are there any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Clive Jones, Councillor Shirley Boyt, who will be late and will note when she arrives. Thank you.
May I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of February as the correct record? Please may I have a show of hands that it is a correct record? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Now moving on to declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest in any items on the agenda? You need to specify which agenda item. Thank you. That's Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish to declare an item in interest in item 129, which is the statements on council-owned companies, because I'm a director of Berrybrook Homes, Wokingham Housing Limited, and the holding company.
Thank you. Councillor Conway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My declaration of interest is on the same item, item 129. It also relates to local authority companies, in my case, as a non-executive director of Loddon Homes and the holding company.
Thank you. And Councillor David Hare, please.
Shall I start again? Sorry. I've got to declare an interest in item 129, the statement of council companies. I'm a director of Optalis. I also have to declare interest in item 126.2. I'm answering a question about GPs, and my wife is a GP. So thank you.
Thank you. Right, and now moving on to Mayor's announcements. I have a few items under the Mayor's announcements that I would like to bring to your attention. A key element of our community ethos is volunteering. On Tuesday, the 14th of March, we held an event to present the Mayor's Award to the volunteers of Wokingham. We all recognise the importance of volunteers to the Wokingham community, as they do so much for so many without seeking reward or recognition. Prior to the evening, I had a really difficult time determining who the winners would be. At the event, we honoured a total of 8 volunteers for their outstanding contribution to the Wokingham residents. The evening was attended not just by the winners, but representatives from many charities and volunteers from all over the borough. And I particularly enjoyed myself meeting so many generous, selfless and wonderful people. The next item was rather unique and has only happened 5 times in the last 70 years. I was invited by the Lord Lieutenant of Berkshire, Mr. James Puxley, to join him at Buckingham Palace as part of his delegation whilst he made his loyal address to the Royal County of Berkshire to the King. The Royal County of Berkshire is only the 27 privileged bodies who each made an address, a concept that stretches back to the 1700s. I, along with the mayors of Bracknell, Slough, Reading, the chair of West Berkshire Council, the Bishop Reading, the Vice Chancellor of Reading University and 4 others joined many in the Great Ballroom. This was a great honour and we listened to many bodies giving their loyal address, which included heads of churches, universities, the Governor of the Bank of England, the Lord Mayor of London, all pledging allegiance to King Charles III. Interestingly, the corporation, the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, gets its own delegation. And I will mention my chauffeur who had to wait in the car park in Buckingham Palace for 3.5 hours. Thank you. It is also with great sadness that I'm going to mention all the hard-working councillors who have decided not to stand for re-election. I would like to thank them all for their years of service they have given to the residents of Wokingham. And I wish them well in their new directions and hopefully we'll all meet again. Thank you. We're now moving on to public question times. I'd like to remind the executives that responses to questions should be no longer than 2 minutes and these will be timed. Thank you. Mr. Richard Taggart to ask the question, the Executive Member of Health, Wellbeing and Adult Services, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As councillors may be aware, the Prevention Concordat for Better Mental Health is underpinned by a prevention-focused, holistic approach to improving our residents' mental health, which in turn contributes to a fairer and more equitable society. The Concordat emphasises collaborative cross-sector working to deliver the best evidence-based practice to support well-being and good mental health within the whole population for those at greater risk and those currently receiving treatment. Can the Council tell us what plans have been made for Wokingham Borough Council to sign up to the updated Prevention Concordat for Better Mental Health with its commitment to promote good mental health for all by strengthening protective influences whilst reducing risk factors?
Thank you very much for your question. We agree that the Concordat is a very good document and encourages all our health and social partners to work together to get what is best for all of our residents, and certainly that's what we want as well. Concordat has been discussed during our Wokingham Integrated Partnership Leadership Board, and that's representatives of health, the voluntary bodies and Wokingham Council working together for the good of the whole. And it is seen as a favourable document. Wokingham Borough Council commit to standing up the Concordat. We will work with our partners to add signatories within our 23-24 integration plan. We'll do what we can.
Thank you. I'm sorry we cannot allow supplementary. So can I move on to question from Peter Humphreys to ask a question at the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways, please.
With the council's finances squeezed like never before, it's disappointing that the Highways Department continues to waste money. I've already highlighted the use of single-use signs littering the borough, and the problem's got even worse since then. There's even one in Borough News at the moment. Back in the day when a highways officer painted white lines around a pothole, It was a sure indicator that it would be soon fixed. But now it seems, due to a lack of communication, the paint is allowed to fade and the holes allowed to get bigger, necessitating another officer to come out and remark the crater. And of course, the bigger the hole gets, the more expensive it will be to repair. As an example, I've provided a photo for members of a growing crater in Crutchley Road, but there are many others like it. Does the council have a plan to break this vicious cycle? And by way of amazing coincidence, the highways team did come out and make a partial repair of the pothole the very day my council question was submitted.
Thank you, Peter, for your question. And yeah, pure coincidence that they came and did it on that particular day. I certainly hadn't pushed them to do it at all. But Wokingham Borough Council has a statutory duty to maintain the public highway, and to ensure that duty is fulfilled, the Borough Council carry out routine safety inspections and within the Wokingham Highway inspection policy, and also investigate issues raised by the public, such as yourself, to ensure that the adopted highway is safe for public use. Any safety defects found will be made safe or repaired as required. The example that you provided here, unfortunately, there was a delay to the repair, which we do apologise for. Following the recent cold and wet periods earlier this year, the officer team, alongside its contractor, have been reviewing processes to improve the punctuality of repairs and are looking at alternative treatment solutions. We hope this will give us an improved speed of repair and a greater notable benefit to our residents. Defects that have been identified are generally marked in white paint. This is to ensure the contractor is aware of the location and the extent of the repair. Defect D2233589, Crutchley Road, Wokingham, as referenced, was made safe on the 14th of March 2023. Due to the location being on the junction, a permanent repair will be programmed to ensure the correct traffic management is in place to protect both the workforce and the public whilst the permanent works are carried out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Humphries, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, well, I'd be interested to know when that's likely to be programmed in, but I recall not so long ago you said that it was going to be reviewed at the Highways Department about the working practices, etc. Is that available as yet to view?
There is a review currently ongoing, and we are currently working with Volker Highways as well to improve their efficiency in the pothole repairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now moving on to agenda item 118. Do we have any petitions? Thank you. Councillor Barry Path, please. You have 3 minutes to talk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This petition is related to the Shinfield Road safe crossing, which Councillor Fishwick had asserted that it wasn't required. And the petition is signed by a number of people, 290 people altogether, parents, and they are addressing Councillor Fishwick. We, the undersigned, disagree with your recent assertion that pedestrian crossing is not necessary outside the main entrance to Crossfield School. We've had 290 responses to the petition. This is a very good response, and we believe that this response will show the council that it is worth looking at it again. The need for a safe crossing has been discussed and agreed by your predecessor, Councillor Pauline Georgeson, and relevant highway officers on many occasions. And after much scoping work by the officer, it was concluded that there was a strong case for a safe crossing on Shinfield Road outside the main entrance to the school. Shinfield Road is a very busy road, and all parents are afraid to allow their children to walk or cycle. As such, the parents drop their children by car. They would much rather their children walk, scoot or cycle to school, but the absence of a safe crossing forces the parents to drop the children by car. The parents want to make a positive contribution to your active travel policies by allowing their children to walk or cycle to work. Road safety is an important factor in encouraging children to travel to school independently and in a more sustained manner. The Shinfield Road is not safe for children to walk, scoot or cycle, and until there is a safe designated place to cross, we are reluctant to allow our children to travel to school on foot, by scooter or by cycle. We encourage you to reconsider your decision and to install a suitable crossing outside the main entrance so that our children can cross the road safely. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to hand your petition in to Democratic Services? Yeah. And a second petition by Charles McGetts, please. Sorry.
Councillor Harper.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
I'm flattered you think I look 10 years younger.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm presenting this petition on behalf of the residents and businesses of Finch Hampstead who are calling on the council to pause and rethink the plan to radically change the road junction known as California Crossroads. This petition has received support from over 800 residents due to concerns over the scheme's design, the impact on local businesses, schools and residents, and the enormous cost at a time when the council are cutting the road budget in real terms. The proposed design is for a shared space where cars, cycles, motorbikes, pedestrians and animals don't have the usual allocated roads and paths, but coexist in the same space and somehow negotiate the crossroads. There have been national calls for these schemes to be halted whilst further research is completed, especially on the impact on disabled people using these spaces. The government's Disabled Persons Transport Advisory Committee has reported that there seems to be over-optimistic expectations of the behaviour of drivers and a lack of understanding of disability on the part of shared spaces supporters. The impact on local businesses during the construction phase, which is optimistically expected to take 3 months, will be a severe blow just as they are recovering from the effects of COVID. Trade at the shops, restaurant, takeaway and garage will be affected, and the proposed reduction in parking spaces will have a long-term impact on those businesses that rely on passing trade. Residents will be forced on long detours to avoid the multiple road closures during the build, and local schools have raised concerns over the removal of safety barriers, which would have traditionally separated young children from passing traffic. It is not acceptable that we risk the safety of children walking to school with this experimental scheme. At a time when the council is cutting funding for road maintenance in real terms, it just doesn't make sense to spend £5.4 million on a scheme which doesn't have local support, will adversely affect local businesses and impact disabled pedestrians. There is 1.3 million of Section 106 money specifically for this crossroads, which can be used to deliver practical changes and visual enhancements, leaving the remaining 4.2 million for other road improvements in the area. Madam Mayor, we are not against improvements to the California Crossroads, but we want a realistic, safe and lower cost scheme that has the support of the people of Finch Hampstead. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to hand in your petition to Democratic Services, please?
It has already been submitted.
Okay, thank you very much. Now moving on to agenda item 119, petition debate, waste collection. I'd like to invite Councillor Norma Youngson as petition organiser to present this petition. You have 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's clear that the majority of residents wish to retain weekly waste collections. Over 2,000 people have now signed our petition, and only 24% of respondents to the Council's consultation liked the idea of moving to fortnightly collections. The Council's Liberal Democrat Labour administration is planning to do away with weekly general and dry recycling waste collections and replace with fortnightly collections. despite the forecast cost of £2 million to implement and the policy not being in the Liberal Democrat or Labour manifestos. Indeed, some of the ruling coalition members in this room tonight have previously pledged in their election literature to maintain weekly waste collections. The £2 million implementation cost is largely due to the purchase of wheelie bins and taking on extra people to administer the change. Because of this upfront expenditure, there will be no savings associated arising from this scheme for several years. Any savings claimed for the fortnightly waste scheme arise from constraining the size of the wheelie bins provided and hence how much general waste residents can put out, forcing them to recycle more. Recycling being cheaper for the council than disposing of general waste. The forecast savings are not guaranteed to be achieved. Conservative councillors believe savings can instead be achieved by making it easier to recycle, by extending the range of materials that can be recycled, and by encouraging residents to adopt recycling to a greater extent. A move to fortnightly collections will see a collection lorry turn up every week at residents' homes, but will take less of people's waste than it previously did. Despite other nearby authorities moving to fortnightly or less frequent collections, previous Conservative administrations in Woking Borough have kept weekly waste collections over that 20 years through careful management of the council's finances. Collection of waste and recycling are important universal services used by almost all residents in the borough. Woking Conservative councillors would retain weekly waste collection and make savings by enabling residents to recycle more of their household waste. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any members who wish to speak on this motion? Please raise your hands. Keep them up until we've got everybody's name. Thank you. And we have 30 minutes for this item.
Don't we need a seconder?
Well, in my notes, sorry, in my notes, it's fine. It will be after. Yeah, that's fine.
No, sorry, Madam Mayor. I was just, as usual, to ask who is going to second it at the beginning, isn't it?
There's a slight difference. Councillor Jorgensen has presented his petition, not his motion. And in my notes, there will be a time when I will ask for a seconder after his right to reply. Okay? Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, to push it, but Councillor Jorgensen presented the petition at the last council meeting. This is a presentation of a motion.
I will take advisement. Okay, here we go. It's 3.5.42, debating petition at a council meeting. If the number of signatories on a petition is more than 1,500, this will trigger a debate at the next available council meeting. Unless it is a petition asking for a senior council officer to give evidence at a public meeting, in this case it will be dealt with in accordance under rule 3.5.43. Okay, does that help clarify it? Okay, as I've said earlier, when you do your right to reply, Councillor Jorgensen, I will then ask if there's a seconder, and at that point, I will ask you. Thank you.
There's a lot of mystified faces over there. What I understand is we debate the petition and at the end of the petition debate, somebody proposes a motion as to what to do with the petition. And that's why there's no seconder now, because we're debating. Norman is in his role of petitioner, not in his role of presenting a motion. Yes? Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Can we now go back? Can you carry on putting the hands up, please? Thank you. Can we just put hands up a little bit higher, please? Thank you. Yeah, that's fine, but you still don't speak twice. Thank you. Thank you. Hands down. Can I start with Councillor Chris Baring, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The system of waste collection affects everyone in the borough, man, woman and child. On the doorstep, it seems that everyone has a view, one way or the other. Politicians that change services without taking seriously the strong views that residents hold risk alienating the people who vote for them. It's unwise and bad politics. The present blue bag system is not broken. There's no legislation which compels changes to be made to it, so the status quo could continue. Why was that not made clear in the consultation? Why was there no explicit option to leave things alone? It doesn't seem to occur to the coalition that people might actually like to retain blue bags. A lot of people heartily dislike wheelie bins and almost invariably refer to Cemetery Junction in Reading as an eyesore they would prefer to avoid. But such a calculation is difficult to make when no business case is put forward for residents. Indeed, the absence of such a business case might cause people to suspect proposed savings in waste collection could be exaggerated. There's nothing wrong in the coalition looking at alternatives to the present system or changes to improve recycling, for example. In 2020, the Conservatives introduced green bags in order to keep recycled paper dry. This caused a lot of fuss from the then opposition, but it's noticeable that now they run the council, the Lib Dems think that green bags are perfectly fine. So by all means, go ahead and propose a new system, but this time put it in your manifesto, as Norman said, for the next election. And when you consult again, which you should do it fairly. Allow the blue bag option to be spelt out as a viable alternative and give the residents, and the councillors for that matter, a full financial assessment of what you propose so they could make an informed judgment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Cornish, please.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Sitting over there, I see my good friend, Councillor Charles Margett, who I know to be a perfectly pleasant and agreeable chap. But I've bad news for you, Charles. I'm sure I can prove conclusively that 76% of the residents of this borough don't like you at all. Or at least I could if I use the Jorgensen School of Statistics. And that means that everyone I ask who says, I like Charles, if they don't actually say that, then I'm afraid they're all black marks against you, even if they say I don't know you. According to Norman, bad news indeed. Charles, I apologise, a total travesty. And that's what this petition is, a total travesty. It's a truth inversion. I've spent my working life using market research data, and to twist it like this would have got me fired. For the record, 24% of respondents to the consultation said they liked the change. 50% were neutral or said they could live with it, and 28% said they didn't like it. Now, this is a change in a service that a majority of users currently find acceptable. It's not a change they're asking for, but a change they are being asked to accept to save taxpayers' money and improve recycling rates. In that context, these numbers are astonishingly positive. Residents have been asked to accept a change for the benefit of the community, and 74% of them have said that at the very least they can live with it. That is unarguable, unless of course you just talk language like Vladimir Putin. Norman warns in his petition of rubbish piling up in the streets. With what evidence? Go to Sandhurst, Windsor, Maidenhead, Marlow, High Wycombe, Henley. You'll find none. These towns have two things in common. They have alternate weekly bin collections, and they're all run by Conservatives. Are Bracknell Conservatives agitating for a return to weekly collections? I don't think so. Now, I do accept, and I think we all accept, I should point out as well, the consultation is claimed to ignore people in small properties. Now, residents of the Gorse Rye community, all small houses and flats and very limited outdoor spaces, have welcomed the introduction of wheelie bins. I do know that some people in this chamber have genuine objections to this, genuine concerns. Maybe it's a matter of sentiment, maybe it is that it's a long-held principle, or just concerns about how wheelie bins look. Now, I might disagree with those, but I can respect the sincerity with which they're held. But this motion is the opposite of sincere. It's about cynically mangling statistics to create social media content. We all know how the game is played. Pick a topic that attracts attention, circulate half-truths and downright lies, whip it up with some synthetic outrage on social media, and invite clicks on a petition devoid of any accurate information. This isn't for the benefit of residents. This stunt is for the benefit of a small clique who've forgotten any purpose for being in this chamber other than to play party politics. It's an insult to the officers who worked on this project. It's an insult to the members of this council who take their role seriously, and it shows open contempt for the actual views of the people of this borough.
Thank you. Councillor Michael Firminger, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I cannot see how these plans will lead to an increase in recycling. There will be less collections, and as a consequence, residents will no doubt recycle less. This will lead to an increase in fly tipping and all the problems that forces upon the environment. The Liberal-Labour coalition has tried to dismiss it by not listening to where 1,800, which is not a small number, Councillor Cornish, have signed this petition and want to maintain the status quo. Where do residents store their recycling and rubbish for longer periods? Many simply do not have the space to store this recycling and rubbish. It is likely to end up on the street causing obstruction, making it difficult, for example, parents with prams, wheelchair users, or indeed others with mobility issues to get around these piles. Also, many properties in the borough are unable to store wheelie bins. I end by saying keep weekly bin collections. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Andrew Croy, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew's very formal, only my primary school teacher gets to call me that, I'm afraid. So I will start with the assumption that we all still recognise that Wokingham is one of the lowest funded unitary authorities in the country, and that therefore the executive needs to be relentless in its desire to save money. I will also assume that we recognise that recycling more is a good thing in its own right, and that we all have a duty to reduce our landfill waste to the lowest possible levels. I have in the past been a fan of blue bags. I have lost count of the number of times I've explained to residents the theory behind blue bags. I guess at the time they were an innovative way to encourage people to put more waste into black boxes. When we scrutinised the new scheme, officers were very clear. Changes in recycling behaviour are more effectively driven by changes to the waste disposal service, combined with effective messaging on waste disposal. So you do the two things together to get the best result. Every pound spent on waste messaging has more impact when it is combined with the change in waste, of the simultaneous change in waste service delivery. Your messaging pound goes further if it is combined with service change. The same pound spent without service change is less effective. There is less value for money in simply messaging on recycling. It is better value for money to message on messaging that is concurrent with service change. The net effect of the scheme will be saving £1 million per year or more. Refusing to back the changes means we are happy to throw away that £1 million a year in savings. The Conservative plan to simply spend more money on messaging is the least efficient way of spending council taxpayers' money. One would have thought by now, trustees, local enablers would have had their eyes wide open for any suggestion that they cannot be trusted with taxpayers' money. But here we are again. They want the least effective method of driving higher recycling rates, and they want to spend money in the least efficient way to do so. And while they are at it, they are throwing away £1 million a year, every year, of possible savings. My only resident who's contacted me about this is Keith Baker, and I suspect he is not terribly representative of the people I talk to every week, as he has massively prejudged the issue. The people I talk to every week are generally understanding of the environmental and financial drivers for the change. I was elected, though I not suspect, by Keith. I was elected by my residents to use my judgment. And I would also point out to the councillor for Sonning that there are members in this chamber who got more votes than on this petition, or than the number you mentioned. I have been presented with evidence, and I've scrutinised the evidence. At the start, I said...
Sorry, councillor, I'm sorry, you're out of time. I do apologise.
I will leave it to your imaginations to guess how I'm going to vote.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Blomenthal, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been talking to residents in our borough, and there is true concern on the doorsteps, especially those who are dealing with the cost of living crisis and struggling families, people who live in small houses, such as in my ward, and they ask, why are we paying so much council tax for a cut in services? I know that no one got elected onto this council to cut services, to make a service worse for residents, but this is what is happening. And I would just say, please listen to the residents, because their concerns are valid and they're real. And this petition is all about them. It's not about me or us or a particular party. It's about them and how this is going to impact on their lives. So I'm very happy to support this petition. I'm proud that the Conservatives have said that if we were to regain power, we'd keep weekly waste collections. So I just ask, please listen to our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubray, please.
You've hashed it again, haven't you? Never mind. I'm sure that the residents who signed this petition did so in good faith, and human nature being what it is, would favour keeping the status quo if it appears to be currently working for them. However, I am very much in doubt that the full picture of the consequences of not changing this service were fully explained to them when they signed the petition. Firstly, I ask if it was explained to them that the weekly food waste collection would still be maintained, and therefore waste food would not be standing around for 2 weeks. Was it also explained that there is a separate collection for medical waste? And was it also explained they would not be expected to store 2 weeks' worth of waste and recycling all at once? And again, was it explained that what is being proposed is a tried and trusted method for over 85% of councils in this country? 85% of councils are already successfully implemented alternative weekly waste collections, and that Woking Borough is really quite the exception for not having done so. I also suspect that it was not explained that not going to alternative weekly waste collections would very likely cost this council £150,000 next year, rising to over £1 million per year by 2025. That is £1 million every year that could be spent on supporting children in care, looking after disabled or elderly adults. Our central government funding here in Woking Borough Council has been cut year on year, and our incomes is well below the inflationary costs. So we need to find ways to make this council more efficient without passing the full weight of our financial pressures onto our residents. By 2025, we'll be expected to find a significant amount of funding to meet the cost of the care cap for adult social care. And there are very few places left for us to look without reducing services or increasing council tax. I also question the Conservatives' calculations, as I think they have failed to factor in that single-use blue plastic bags cost us at least £350,000 per year and rising. A number of that, many of our residents come from areas where there have been wheelie bins before and are horrified with the blue bags, which regularly get attacked by foxes and other animals. With the obvious benefits that come from this alternate weekly waste collection methods, both financially and environmentally, no one has yet given me a good reason as to why we should not follow the well-trodden path of managing our waste in this way. And the Conservatives seem to be just creating debate without following the facts. this strategy that we have is a good strategy. It will save money. Most of the country is already happily doing this and benefiting from it. So why shouldn't we? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alison Swaddle, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking on behalf of the many residents in Woodley who, during doorstep conversations with me, have expressed their serious concerns about a move away from weekly collections of their rubbish and recycling. Many of them signed our petition. In fact, I think I only met 3 people who didn't choose to sign it. It's obvious to them that collecting their recycling and non-recyclable waste fortnightly means having to store twice as much. Residents who fill 2 green bags of recycling will now need to find space to store 4 bags. And if residents, as we are encouraging them to do, recycle even more, because we all want our residents to do that, to enable the Borough Council to achieve the rightly ambitious target of increasing recycling by an additional 20%. But I just can't see, how families are going to store all these extra bags. And the other thing that puzzles me is looking at the budget, where is the money to buy twice as many green bags for all our houses? We know when we invested in these waterproof recycling bags that it's a sizable cost, and I haven't seen this mentioned at all. I'd also go back to Councillor Shepherd-Dubey mentioning the cost per year of the change. However, we had a consultation on changing the electoral cycle, which would have saved £1 million. Yes. However, the party opposite chose to ignore what our residents have said they chose to do.
Sorry,
please don't interrupt.
Thank you.
Right. So a family of 5 may well have 5 green bags to store. And we don't all live in large houses, as I think Councillor over there mentioned. Myself, I live in a small masonette. I'm very fortunate to have a meter cupboard by my front door that I can fit 2 green bags in. I couldn't fit any more in. And I know many residents also don't have garages or outbuildings, and they're wondering where on earth they'd store the recycling we're encouraging them to collect. Collecting weekly is particularly appreciated with those by smelly waste. We all know young families. I'm sure you all remember what it was like if you had several children in nappies, the amount of waste you produce, and also those with pets. You've got to dispose of the litter. I've got 2 cats. I can't recycle cat litter. I can't put it into food waste. It has to go into blue bags. Not offering the option in the waste consultation to choose the status quo of keeping weekly collections denied our residents the opportunity to express their preferred option. If you were asked, do you want 2 or 3 weekly? Then it was no surprise that residents reluctantly said, well, we could accept 2 weekly.
Sorry, Councillor Swaddle, we're out of time.
Oh, I think you know how I'm going to vote.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Shenton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are many reasons why I disagree with Councillor Jorgensen. Not least is that he uses statistics as a drunken man uses lamppost for support rather than illumination, if I may quote Andrew Lang. Then there is the shocking fact that he wants us to continue to burn, quite literally, over £1 million per annum of our residents' council tax totally unnecessarily. And of course, his reckless addiction to single-use plastic bags that are specially made from petrochemicals just to be incinerated into greenhouse gases and particulate matter, despite his party having declared a climate emergency. But I've left those topics largely to other speakers because instead I will raise the subject upon which he is silent: extended producer responsibility. As a result of the 2021 Environment Act, under EPR, the government will place similar councils in groups and assess them for their efficiency and effectiveness in both cost and performance. Each council will then be compared to the benchmark set by the best in its group. And if it falls short, the government will serve an improvement notice.
If a council in receipt of an improvement notice fails to implement the required changes, it will lose funding from the fund that the government will create from the fees set to be charged to producers. Given the tiny number of councils that cling to plastic bags collected weekly, if Wokingham is still among them, it will find itself compared with councils that use containerised alternate weekly collections and will be found wanting. A stated objective of the government is consistency. So, fellow members, should we expect the government to instruct the 270 or so English councils that already use containerised AWC to revert to a weekly plastic bag fest? Or should we expect the government to instruct the plastic addicts to change to containerised AWC? Surely it's better for us to make an orderly transition now than to be forced into a hasty change in a couple of years. Because, Councillor Canute, you cannot hold back the tide of wheel bins forever.
Thank you. Councillor Gary Cowan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Listening to that debate, I'm in awe by the vindictive nastiness of the party on the right to the party on the left. Historically, the Conservatives have always been critical of the opposition, but here we've had remarks from Councillor Shenton and Councillor Cornish, were horrendous remarks to other members of this chamber. The very thing that Sarah Kerr said shouldn't be going on, although she was referring to officers. Blue bags, the system worked perfectly. When it was failing, we increased the size of the blue bags to make them fit in the dustbins, and it worked. There were problems, of course, like any new system, but the end result was it worked up okay. There was always an aversion in this chamber to having streets like Reading, which hundreds of wheelie bins all over the place, because they're all properties with multiple occupancy, and they don't have garages, and they don't have back gardens, and they don't have waste bin storage places. There's all of these problems to deal with. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Attacking the charges without producing the evidence to support the charges is a pretty low trick as well. And I think parties that sink to that low should be ashamed of themselves. Key respect. What respect did we have in this conversation to date from this party on the right to this party on the left? I'd say very, very little. It's the same respect they're showing my fellow independent councillors. I'll say no more on that, but I will say that the system we've got now works quite well. There are other ways to make savings. There are other advantages the council could pick up on, and they won't. They're just driven by ideological illogics. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say to Alison, I've been doing a lot of door knocking and not one single person has mentioned this issue to me. I understand the concerns of those residents who signed the petition, but we need to recognise that many of their concerns, as we've heard from Ian's reply to a question at Tuesday's executive meeting, can and will be addressed before the changes are made. We must also recognise the general level of acceptance of the need for changes expressed in the Council's consultation on this subject. The opposition's attempts to construe acceptance as objection seems a rather desperate tactic to undermine the clear message of the consultation. A significant majority of those who responded either supported or accepted the need for the changes. May I remind colleagues of the context in which the Executive made its decision? The Council is currently not able to secure the recycling rates that we would all like to see. The councils that are best performing in terms of recycling all have alternative weekly collections. The evidence suggests clearly that alternate weekly connections, of residual waste encourages more recycling. More recycling saves the council and therefore the council taxpayer money. It's worth again restating that the council has faced and continues to face considerable financial challenges. Double-digit inflation, rising demand for services, shortfalls in anticipated income and interest rate rises have put enormous pressure on the council. Just to make things more difficult, the government has provided a totally inadequate increase in core funding for Wokingham, nowhere near enough to cover the costs of inflation, never mind enough to help us pay for increased demands for services. In these circumstances, difficult decisions have had to be made. Changing the waste collection regime was one of those difficult decisions. But the savings to be made from when containerisation comes in will be considerable, about £1 million a year. If the opposition want to retain weekly residual waste collection, they're going to have to come clean about where they are going to make savings of £1 million a year, not just for 1 year, but on a repeated basis, year after year. Are they going to cut money that we've devoted to those who are most in need? Are they going to reduce the funding to ensure we have enough school places? Madam Mayor, I urge all councillors with an open mind to reasoned argument to reject this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Kerr, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Let there be no excuse for single use. Does this sound familiar to anyone? These were the closing words from Councillor Murray when proposing a motion in full council in July 2020. Let me read the motion wording for you now. At its meeting on July 18th, 2019, the full council voted unanimously to declare a climate emergency across Wokingham Borough and to commit itself to being carbon neutral by 2030. In order to achieve this crucial aim and to live up to our environmental responsibilities, we understand that it is essential we take steps to immediately reduce the amount of carbon we either directly or indirectly use each year. It is clear that no responsible council can take action on climate change without seeking to drastically reduce the amount of single-use plastics consumed by both its residents and by the council in its everyday operations. In face of the overwhelming evidence about the impact that single-use plastics have on our lives, climate, seas, rivers and broader environments, Wokingham Borough Council commits to ensuring that, wherever possible, single-use plastics are eliminated from use within the council and all council-controlled environments as soon as possible. Councillor Blumenthal seconded the motion and specifically states that this motion was, and I quote, empowering the council to lead by example. Removing the single-use plastic bags from our waste service is one of the ways we're leading by example, and the hypocrisy from the opposition benches is astonishing. In terms of recycling rates, Powys Council is currently the leading local authority, achieving recycling rates in excess of 68%. When they introduced alternate weekly collection, their recycling rates jumped significantly. And it's not just Powys. Data from across the country demonstrates that alternate weekly collection and containerisation, such as weekly bins, increase recycling rates and reduce waste tonnage overall. More than 80% of councils do this now. The evidence is clear. There has been a full business case. I've not seen so much information go before people. Why would the opposition ignore this wealth of evidence?
Councillor Kerr, I have somebody wishing to...
No, I'm just putting my hand up to ask to speak, please.
I'll continue, if that's okay.
Okay, if we have time, okay?
My time's not been stopped for the interruption. The increase in recycling and as such, reduction in residual going for incineration has demonstrable carbon savings that have been publicly published and been through the council scrutiny process. Let me remind you, we unanimously declared that we would reduce our carbon emissions to net zero. It seems that some people want to go back on that commitment. Thankfully, there are those of us that will keep working to protect our environment and planet because we want a habitable planet for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregor Murray, please. We're just in time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just because I was quoted, I thought I would just clarify a couple of things. As part of my speech, I did actually say that there had to be exceptions to our ban on single-use plastics. And the other thing I'd say is that if we take away blue bags from our residents, what do we think residents are going to put into their wheelie bins? They're going to put their rubbish into plastic bags and put those plastic bags into their wheelie bins because we have bins in our house and we put plastic bags in them. And I don't know about you, but when I had kids and I was putting nappies, I didn't just put them into a bin or leave them lying around in my house. I put them into a plastic bag and then put the bag in the bin. So to imply that just because we're moving over to, or might be moving over to wheelie bins, we're going to eradicate single-use plastics is a complete fallacy, because residents will still use them.
Thank you. Councillor, thank you. We've now run out of time. Councillor Jorgensen, you have a right to reply. You have 3 minutes. And do you have a seconder?
I do have a seconder.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, you have a right to reply. Would you like to speak
Is the
for 3 minutes?
seconder allowed to speak?
Yes, please.
Sorry, is the seconder allowed to speak first?
No.
Please clarify.
No. The seconder doesn't have a right to reply. You have a right to reply. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This petition and motion is seeking to retain weekly waste collections, an option not offered in the consultation. If the members opposite were so confident that fortnightly collections would be welcomed, why was that not offered in the consultations? We would introduce other service changes to drive behaviour change, as we have previously done over the last 5 years. Examples being the introduction of food waste recycling and the wider range of plastics. Each of these increased recycling rate substantially. We just heard from Gregor about plastic bags. Everybody will use plastic bags for the waste. The same applies to the food waste caddies. All that's happened is that we've transferred the cost from the council to the residents. Nothing much had changed, just a transfer. We provided a budget only a few weeks ago, which showed how we would balance the books. So we've done that. One other thing is that the government, as was mentioned, is planning to bring in new legislation around recycling. So things are likely to change quite substantially in the next couple of years in any case. So now would seem a very bad time to commence any major change, such as that proposed. Finally, the £2 million implementation costs not shown explicitly in the CFO's report. It's kind of hidden there in the annual savings number. So just to stress, it is an upfront cost, £2 million being spent before any change service commences and before any savings are realised. The Lib Dems plan to take this £2 million from council financial reserves, despite those same people objecting last year to the Conservatives using reserves to fund COVID recovery costs.
That's what they said in scrutiny.
So,
Sorry, quiet, please.
thank you. I propose the motion contained in your papers. Thank you very much.
Could I ask for a recorded vote, please?
You've got 6.
But we haven't got there yet.
Who's the, sorry, the seconder is Gregor Murray. Thank you. Okay.
But we haven't. Right.
We got that. We're now moving straight to the vote. It's recorded. Thank you.
This is for all those in favour of the motion. Sam Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Keith Baker.
For.
Councillor Barry Bath. Sorry.
Thank you. 4.
Councillor Rachel Bishopworth.
Against.
Councillor Laura Bloomthal.
For.
Councillor Chris Bowring.
For.
Councillor Shirley Boyt. Councillor Prue Bray.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Anne Chadwick.
For.
Councillor Stephen Conway.
Against.
Councillor David Cornish.
Against.
Councillor Gary Cowan.
I'm for the motion.
Councillor Andy Croy. Councillor Phil Cunnington.
For.
Councillor David Davis.
For.
Councillor Peter Dennis.
Against.
Councillor Lindsay Ferris.
Against.
Councillor Michael Thermager.
For.
Councillor Paul Fishwick.
Against.
Councillor Jim Fruin.
Against.
Councillor Maria G.
Against.
Councillor John Halsall.
For.
Councillor David Hare.
Against.
Councillor Peter Harper.
For.
Councillor Pauline Hellier-Simons.
For.
Councillor Graham Howe.
For.
Councillor Chris Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor John Kaiser.
For.
Councillor Sarah Kerr.
Against.
Councillor Abdul Loys.
For.
Councillor Tahir Meher.
Against.
Councillor Morag Malvern.
Against.
Councillor Charles McGetts.
For.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts.
For.
Councillor Adrian Mather.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Mickelber.
Against.
Councillor Stuart Monroe.
For.
Councillor Gregor Murray.
For.
Councillor Alistair Neal.
Against.
Councillor Jackie Rance.
For.
Councillor Beth Rowland.
Against.
Councillor Ian Shenton.
Against.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay.
Against.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Debay.
Against.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
Against.
Councillor Mike Smith.
Against.
Councillor Wayne Smith.
For.
Councillor Bill Soane.
For.
Councillor Alison Swaddle.
For.
Councillor Shahid Yunus.
For.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion has been carried. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 120, the Council's response to the Local Government Boundary Commission. We have 30 minutes. Do I have a proposer for this, please? Prue Bray.
Seconder.
And your seconder is? Stephen Conway. Thank you. And Councillor Bray, would you like to speak for 3 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You will remember that the council sent in some proposals to the Local Government Boundary Commission back in the autumn in response to their initial consultation on the review of our ward boundaries. They have now reviewed all the submissions and published their proposals on the 31st of January. The Electoral Review Working Group looked at those proposals and is recommending the council respond as laid out on pages 41 to 43 of the agenda. The Commission's proposals are largely based on the council's submission. They suggested 5 small tweaks, all of which the working group supported. Now, if you remember the council submission, it included both a majority and a minority view with regard to 2 areas. For Hurst and Twyford and Ruscombe, and for the Spencerswood and Swallowfield areas, the majority view was to have 2 3-member wards, whereas the minority wanted 2 2-member wards and 2 1-member wards. The Commission preferred 2 3-member wards, agreeing with the majority view. I would actually go so far as to say they strongly preferred that. Nevertheless, the Conservatives wish to continue to support the proposal for 2-member and 1-member wards, and we have accommodated them by recording their position in the proposed response, even though the majority of the working group agreed with the Commission that 2 3-member wards was better. Finally, the working group debated ward names, and we have made suggestions for what we think are better names for some wards than the ones suggested, with our proposed names being ones which we think have more of a sense of place. So I would like to thank the members of the working group and the officers who so ably supported us, and I'm happy to recommend that the Council approves the submission.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the report? Oh, the second was Stephen Conway. Thank you. Councillor Gary Curran, you wish to speak against the report?
Yes, I do. I'm a belief that, and I see in the working wards around here, that you can have 3 ward members, all of different political parties. They all have very different points of view on how something should be dealt with, and it gives the residents, I would suggest, an unease as to be able to deal with it. It works if all are members of the same party, but if they're not, it doesn't. Also, the mother of all parliaments has a system where a resident or a member of the public, whatever you want to call them, they are responsible to one person, their MP, not one of 3 MPs or 2 of 3 or whatever. It's one of 3, and I believe that we should be going the opposite route and having single wards of 54 single wards, and that should be with four yearly cycles, and that should be our process. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I should have asked Councillor Conway if he wanted to reserve his rights, but seeing nobody else wants to speak. Sorry, Councillor Pauline Jorgensen. Can I please ask Councillor Conway, would you like to reserve your right?
Well, I had imagined I wouldn't need to, but I now clearly do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say that I completely agree with Gary in his comments that it's a lot clearer in some areas to have single-member wards and to have less frequent elections. I completely agree with him. But because the working group has kindly included both sets of comments about this, both our comments that we believe that there are individual areas like Hurst that are better serviced by one clear, responsible member, rather than a larger area with very disparate views that's covered by 3 members. As the working group has agreed to cover that in their report, we will be voting with them.
Councillor Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And first, let me say I do understand Gary's perspective, and I quite respect the point of view he's expressed, as Pauline does. But we have to, I'm afraid, accept that the Commission have made it very clear they want 3-member wards. I'm glad Pauline acknowledged that the report represents fairly the minority view on the working group. I have to say the working group was chaired superbly by Prue. She ensured absolute fairness throughout. She ensured that every point of view was carefully considered and given airtime. And I think we've ended up with a position that represents both the majority and minority views very well. So I urge all councillors to support this response.
Thank you. Councillor Prey, would you like your right to reply?
Just very briefly, Madam Chairman, I'm grateful for the acknowledgement that Stephen's just given me, and to thank the members of the working group again, and Pauline for her words that we have tried to accommodate them. I would just like to point out to Gary that if you have 3 councillors for an area, it does actually give residents a choice as to who they can go to. If they don't get on with the one person that they've got, or they don't agree with them, that can make life quite difficult. If that person's ill, or they go away, or I'm not suggesting this is true of any of our current councillors, but if they didn't actually know how to do their job, you would have nobody else that can help you. And that's not a very good position to be in. But in any case, as Stephen said, the Commission has made it fairly clear they want 3-member wards. And so that is what is likely to happen. But nevertheless, we are happy to continue to make the case to them that there are people who would like 2-member and 1-member wards. I think that's probably all I need to say.
Thank you. Can we now move for the vote? For the recommended 4, please raise your hands. Okay. Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. Against? Thank you. Recommendations are carried. Thank you. Now moving on to agenda item 121, changes to the Constitution. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Shepherd-Dupre. And do you have a seconder? Thank you. Would you wish to speak for 3 minutes? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Jorgensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'd like to request separate votes on recommendations 1A to 1D, please.
Can you say that again so we've captured them?
We'd like separate votes on recommendations 1A to 1D, please.
Each item?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
I'd actually say that we probably want separate votes on all of them.
Thank you, that's fine then.
Okay. Okay, let's begin with this. Our Constitution Review Working Group has been busy, and these are the last of the proposed changes to the Constitution this year. I want to thank everyone who's been on this working group and all those who've put forward amendments that we have discussed. So now, these are the proposed amendments that are being put forward to this council. 1A, firstly, this is trying to help solve problems we have with having recent years with getting through the council business in our meetings. This amendment is aimed at helping to speed things up, and 1A asks when a public question is submitted in a meeting, they will be displayed on the screen, allowing the exec member to answer it. This will still allow members of the public who are present to ask a supplementary question. This is a common practice in other councils, and I understand that the question is still read out when there are visually impaired people present. 1B amends 5242 so that it clears up the wording related to the responsibility and ensures that all executive members have a responsibility for the council's objectives, even when it relates to an individual portfolio. In 1C, we are also trying to tidy up the points related to the executive members of the Environment, Sport and Leisure's portfolio and consolidated a lot of what have been listed, which were contentious items. These are now just the headings of antisocial behaviour, community safety, crime reduction and prevent. In 1D, there are some items that the Planning Committee wanted to change within their area of the Constitution. I think the most notable thing is that ward members now have to discuss household applications with the officers when they are calling it in to the Planning Committee. This is not intended to block application listings, but it is intended to ensure that councillors actually seek appropriate planning advice from our officers, who are experts on planning legislation after all. Item 2 was a request that came as a question from Councillor Gary Cowan. We are now proposing to extend the council's employee assistance programme so that it includes council members. We want to ensure that councillors too can access the same level of care as we would offer staff members. This will cost the council approximately £300, but we believe it's easily justifiable and an appropriate spend. In point 3, we are proposing to increase the Constitution Review Working Group to 5 members. This would still follow the rules of political balance, but it would ensure that we always keep at least 2 opposition members. Having sat as the lone opposition member myself on this committee before, I know it is a challenging position to be in, and I have suggested increasing this number in the past. I note that the Conservative group were unhappy with this arrangement last year when they became the opposition, so I hope they will be willing to support this now for the following years. Point 4 are changes to the terms of reference. Oops. Oh crumbs, my keyboard's gone mad. excuse me 1 second, are changes to the terms of reference for the audit committee, which have come from the audit committee themselves. Most of the changes are minor tweaks, but it does include the addition of 2 independent members, which will allow the committee to introduce individuals with relevant experience of financial management. It also changes the position of the committee to being just a reviewer of the statement of accounts rather than the owner, in line with the SIPFA guidelines.
Sorry, you're out of time. I do apologise.
I've just finished. It's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the report? Thank you. Councillor Bray, would you like to reserve your right or speak now?
I would like to reserve my right, please.
Thank you. Can everybody put their hands up again, just to make sure we've captured you all? Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do you want us to talk about all of the ones, or do we do it on an individual basis? Because I want to talk about 1A and probably 4.
The whole, please.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
So on 1A, I'm actually quite strongly against this change. There's 2 reasons for it. First of all, I understand the rationale, but it's going to save 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. It's not tackling the core problem. Secondly, when you look at the proposed wordings, frankly, it's very sloppy. It says that the question will be displayed on the screen. It doesn't say that the resident will not be allowed to speak. So you are creating confusion in there. So either you should be saying the resident will not be allowed to speak and it will be displayed, or it stays as is. So you're creating confusion. My key complaint about it is it's yet again another attack on the democratic rights of our residents. Residents want to come here. They want to have their voice heard. They don't want to have a IT system being their words. When they present with a passion. They present with emotion. And that's what is important to allow them to do it. So I think is actually removing some of the democracy. And it's only, as I said, for 15 or 20 minutes worth of savings. The other one I would like to talk about is on 1C, which is, I have a particular interest that I note, I think this is 2.2, that the recommendation for travellers, responsibility for travellers, is being removed. Well, I can speak from experience. I was, a long time ago, executive member with responsibility for those days, GRT. I know the terminology's changed. I think it's actually very important that there is an executive member with a direct responsibility for travellers, for GRT, whatever you want to call them, because they are a core group of people in the borough and other boroughs. And so I think we should have a named individual to deal with that. After all, we have officers that are specifically targeted, or I believe we still have officers specifically targeted into that community.
Sorry, you're out of time.
Okay.
I do apologise. Thank you. Councillor Rachel Burgess, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Labour Group will not be supporting recommendations 1A, 1D and recommendation 3. So on 1A, which is what Councillor Baker was just talking about with public questions being put up on the screen, it seems to us to be disrespectful of the members of the public who've taken the time to attend a meeting. And they should be able to speak their question. It also raises some accessibility issues, and I note that Councillor Shepherd-Dubé addressed that. On 1D, regarding the change in the Planning Committee terms of reference, we don't agree with the items in part 8.1.1L, which is regarding the listing of applications. So this change makes it more difficult for councillors to list applications and instead gives officers more power to make decisions. The changes state that there must be a, quote, material planning reason, but doesn't state what that means or who decides what is material. On recommendation 3, we don't feel it's appropriate to state that there should be explicitly 2 members of the opposition on the working group. It just might not be appropriate depending on what the political balance is. We think this group should be according to political balance rules, although we are happy with it increasing to 5. I also wanted to just come back on Councillor Baker's comments about travellers. We don't single out any other ethnic group in our constitution. I've got no idea why we should be doing that for travellers. It's not justifiable. And just lastly, I'd like to speak in favour of the changes to the Audit Committee terms of reference. These bring the committee's terms of reference up to date with best practice, and they bring in less emphasis on the Audit Committee as an approving body and more emphasis on the committee scrutinising, challenging, gaining assurance over matters of governance and risk and control. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregor Murray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm also going to speak against recommendation 1A. As the amendment is currently worded, it appears to suggest residents won't actually get to ask their questions in this forum. Residents come here typically as a last resort, and it's not an easy thing to do. They come to us because they have a problem in their lives or in the neighbourhood where they live, and they need our help to resolve it. And as Councillor Burgess has just said, we need to respect that right. They deserve to be heard. During my time as a councillor, I've answered over 100 questions, either in the council or in the executive, some of which Keith even let me finish. And I've learned that residents ask questions. It's more than just the words that they use. It's about their cadence. It's about the passion that they put behind it. It's about the words and the phrases that they emphasize. And we can't just respond to their words. We have to respond to the way that they ask as well. Residents deserve to be heard, and they deserve to be seen in this forum as well. And if we put a barrier between them and asking their questions, they'll stop coming. And that's not what we want. There are other ways to save time in this meeting. There are other ways that we can find the 5, 10, 15 minutes that could be saved just by somebody not asking their questions. I think we need to examine how we go about doing that and how we find time in other ways, rather than putting barriers between residents coming here and asking us their questions, as they are democratically entitled to do.
Councillor Gary Cowan, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason I raised this point is when this was brought to council as a motion, with I'm very pleased to say Pauline Hillier-Simons giving me advice on how the LGA could be used to help us function. I follow that route, but one of the points that did concern me, and although one could argue there's a constitutional issue around it, I believe that as the group represents all of the members of this council chamber, they shouldn't be here to score political points against each other. What they should be here is they should be here to try and improve the constitution, so we have a constitution that works better for all of our residents and members. Councillor Baker brought the point up about we would upset residents if we treat them the way this suggests. And one example of that very recently was when a resident raised an issue on allotments, simple allotments in the borough. And he ended up on the vexatious list in the council, and he was denied access to this chamber to ask a question. Fortunately, common sense did prevail. He was to do that, but I still have no idea if he's come up with the vexatious complainants list, or if he's still sitting there not being able to ask the public a question. What this is a barrier to change, and the thing I can't understand is, for probably 20 odd years probably, we've had a constitution that's been rolled on, tweaked, rolled on, tweaked, rolled on and tweaked, and we've now got to a point where at long last common sense has prevailed, and we're going to do something about it starting in June after the election, and that I welcome. But what it does not suggest to me is that if we're going to have meetings to make changes and a working group to influence and change all of this, surely that's the time to make these changes, not now. I mean, why are we making them now when our new constitutional review working group will be meeting in June to try and come up with a programme? And that's why I will vote against it, because I think it's failing to achieve what it should be setting out to achieve, and that's represent our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Hellier-Simon, please.
Comment in relation to 1A, in fact, a question really, and indeed a rhetorical one. It doesn't really need an answer. Thank you. At the moment, we're very fortunate that we have no unsighted members on our council, but that could change and we could get one. And so how is that going to support our policy of equality and non-discrimination? It wouldn't. And I believe that all parties in this chamber are committed to that policy. And it's just simply for that reason that I just cannot support 1A, because we don't know who we might get, and I'm not willing to set up a situation that will discriminate against anybody.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Croy, please.
I beg your pardon. It's like a curse, isn't it? So I wasn't going to say anything, but I just wanted to agree with Gary that I was surprised when this came up again. I thought it would all be taken care of as part of the comprehensive review of the Constitution, but also just to perhaps follow up on what Keith said about the section on travellers. Yeah, it's right to support communities which need support, but the way the current responsibilities are listed in our Constitution is an absolute disgrace. Where you are listing people along with fly tipping, vermin, noise and bonfires, you are getting back into a dark period of language that we do not need, and I welcome the changes here.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to attempt against the run of events to launch what may prove to be a futile defence of the change recommended in 1D. That's the listing arrangements that Rachel was concerned about. Can I just explain the background to this? Many of us who serve on the Planning Committee will be very familiar with extremely long meetings. Many of them go on until 11 o'clock when they start at 7. They're very intense meetings. You can't even have a comfort break. If you leave the room, that's the end of your chance to contribute to the debate on a particular application. So it's very intense work. And what I'm afraid does rather distress members of the Planning Committee from time to time is when a colleague lists an application, usually a householder application, without any really good planning reasons for objecting to it. It has to be covered in the committee. It takes time on what's already usually a very full agenda. What this change does is simply require members, before they list an application, to talk to the planning officer. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, that they should talk to the planning officer and make sure that the objections they have are sound planning reasons. So I would urge colleagues to think carefully about Rule 1D and Recommendation 1D and the change it's suggesting. It is not going to make it impossible for members to list applications. Far from it. It's just going to mean they list them in a way that is most effective.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth, please.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about point C. The wording that we have currently says that the executive member for the Environment, Sport and Leisure, part of their duties is, and I'm quoting, is to develop and manage the council's approach to travellers, fly tipping and vermin. This is an utterly dehumanising and unacceptable way of referring to a marginalised group of people. This is the second time we've come to council to ask to replace this wording. I'd like to call on everybody in this chamber, please, to vote in favour of replacing this appalling wording in point C. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jim Frewen, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to raise a point on 1C, because part of the new approach is the word prevent. I'd really like to understand what that means in further detail, because if it is prevent in its purest term, I don't see how, as a council, we can do prevent of terrorism and radicalisation for the £300 cost that we've currently got there. It's a totally different skill set. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maria G, please.
Thank you. All my ancestors are Irish. I was the first generation born in England. And I would just like to say that I had an uncle who was itinerant, and I find it extremely offensive to have travellers lumped with fly tipping, vermin, noise and bonfires. It's an utter disgrace and we need to get it. I understand what Councillor Baker was saying. Just not mentioning travellers here doesn't mean that there won't be anybody who'd be responsible for supporting this marginalised group, which are named as an ethnic group, but it does get rid of this offensive language in here, and I would definitely support 1C. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor John Kaiser, please.
Yes, can I just add, I also agree it's worded badly, and to see the three things together are wrong. But I can't support it because I believe that the word prevent says nothing to anybody. And Jim's alluded to £300. I don't know what you get for £300 when you start talking about prevent. I mean, are we doing the police's job? Because I've never seen that brought to this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Prue-Bray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we are proposing that we vote on each of these items separately. This will enable people to support the things they are in favour of, even if they don't agree with the whole package. And for clarity, the Lib Dem group have a free vote on each item. So let me briefly run through the different recommendations. So 1A is yet another apparently doomed attempt to try to save time at meetings, this time by displaying written questions instead of reading them out. But it also says that if the questioner isn't present, they'll get a written answer instead of using up time with a verbal response that they aren't there to hear. I don't think that's going to get through. It's another go at something. If people have other ideas for saving time, please submit them. We will be happy to hear them. 1B, I don't think I've heard anything about. It's tidying up that encourages corporate working for the executive. 1C, we've heard from Rachel, it unfortunately links travellers and vermin. There's a bit of a red herring crept in here. Prevent is a statutory duty of the council, I believe, and this doesn't add it. It's something we're already having to do. Yeah, it's all to do with counter-terror and so on. But also the £300 is for item 2, nothing to do with prevent. So we're not, I don't know how much prevent costs, but it's certainly not £300. But it is not changing that. We're just trying to get rid of the discriminatory language about travellers. 1D, you've heard a defence from Stephen. It's just trying to ensure there are legitimate planning reasons behind a listing before a listing is made. 2 is the Employee Assistance Provider Scheme. I hope everybody's going to support that. I think that's a valuable thing to do. We're trying to make the Constitution Review Working Group more democratic by having more than one person from not from the ruling group. If people don't like that suggestion, come up with another suggestion, but that's our first stab at it. And the final one, which I hope is not controversial, is changing the terms of reference for the Audit Committee to the current SIPFA guidance, which has been through the Audit Committee and got their approval. So, as I say, the way forward is to vote on each recommendation separately, and everybody is free to support the parts which they agree with.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dupre, would you like a right to reply?
No, I think Prue's summed it up nicely. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now go to the vote. We're doing this separately, starting for recommendation 1A.
So
4. Recommendation 1A. Against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? Thank you. Recommendation 1A falls. Moving on to recommendation 1B. Those for the recommendation, please raise your hands. Okay. Any against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? Carried. Thank you. Now moving on to recommendation 1C. Those for, please raise your hands. Against, please raise your hands. Abstentions? Thank you. Carried. Moving on to recommendation 1D. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Against, please raise your hands. Abstentions? Recommendation falls. Moving on to recommendation 2, those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? Recommendation 2 is carried. Moving on to recommendation 3, those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? Recommendation 3 is carried. Moving on to recommendation 4, those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? Recommend 4 is carried. Thank you very much. I'm going to say, before we move on to the next one, can I have a 5-minute comfort break, please? So everybody please have a 5-minute comfort break. Thank you. See you here just before past. Thank you. Thank you. Is everybody back? Not quite. Thank you. I'd like to continue with the meeting now. I think we've got most people back. Thank you. We're now going on to agenda item 122, member parental leave policy. Can I confirm who's the proposer? Rachel. And do you have a seconder? Thank you. Would you like to speak for 3 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am very pleased to be able to bring this policy on parental leave to the Council, with thanks to Councillor Laura Blumenthal, who originally proposed that we adopt a policy, and to the officers and the cross-party working group who worked to deliver the proposal. As councillors, we have no statutory right to time off when we become parents, and we're required to attend at least one meeting every 6 months. If we don't do this, we automatically time out and cease to be a councillor. While we as a body can vote to extend a councillor's time away from the council, and I would hope that we would all be sympathetic to a request that we do this, it does introduce a level of uncertainty for those who would like to serve the community but are also hoping to become a parent. This policy will give certainty to councillors by allowing an automatic extension of absence from the council for any member who becomes a parent and takes qualified parental leave to allow them to care for their new family member. It also details how allowances and special situations such as a premature birth should be handled and the administration of the leave. This policy is based on the LGA model policy and has been put together by our officers with input from a cross-party working group. I hope that this policy will encourage more young people, and in particular more young women, to stand to represent their community as councillors. Better representation of younger people, parents of young children and women on the council can only strengthen our work, and I hope that all councillors will be able to vote for this policy tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody wish to speak against the report? That looks like a no, so we can go straight to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Against? Abstentions? Recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Item 123 of the annual report from the Audit Committee. We have 10 minutes for this, and I understand Rachel Burgess is going to propose this report. And do you have a seconder? Thank you. Okay. Right. Councillor Rachel Burgess, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The Audit Committee's had a very busy year, meeting 6 times with very full agendas, including overseeing the Council's governance arrangements, gaining assurance on internal controls and risk management, overseeing their internal audit and investigation function, and reviewing the production and audit of the external financial statements. I'm particularly pleased with some of the changes that have been made this year to improve the operation of the committee. These include the recruitment and induction of an independent member on the committee, closer links between the chair and the head of internal audit and investigation, a full revision of the committee's terms of reference, as we heard earlier, and some very effective training sessions for members of the committee. Further improvements are planned for the forthcoming year as well. And finally, I would just like to thank the officers for supporting the committee so very well during the year, and for the valuable contributions of members of the committee during the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the report? That looks like no. So can we go straight to the report? Those who accept it, please raise your hands. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. Recommendation carried. Thank you. Agenda item 124, the annual report from the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. I understand Councillor Jim Frone is going to propose the report. And do you have a seconder? Thank you. Would you like to speak for 3? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. At the start of this municipal year, Wokingham was given some peer feedback on how we conducted overview and scrutiny. This feedback identified a large number of could improve areas. I thank this chamber for giving me the opportunity to try and achieve some of these improvements. I believe we have moved in the right direction, and this has been confirmed by a recent independent peer review and from feedback from officers and members. I would like to thank all involved in ONS this year and simply ask that the direction of improvement is maintained as we go forwards. I commend this report to the Council.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the report? No. Those in favour, we go straight to the vote. Please raise your hands. Against? Abstentions? Thank you. The report is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 125 on the agenda, reports from members appointed to outside body. Who is proposing this report? Thank you. And do you have a seconder? Thank you. Do you wish to speak? Councillor Conway? Thank you.
Not at great length, you'll be relieved to know. I think this is a very routine matter to note these reports, but I would like to just say the reports do demonstrate that, at least in some cases, councillors are really taking this responsibility very seriously and engaging in the activities of the bodies to which they've been appointed. So I'd like to thank those councillors who have put in so much work on these outside bodies.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against? We go straight to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Report carried. Thank you. Now moving on to member question time. Agenda item 126. I'd like to invite Councillor Gary Cowan to ask his question of the Executive Member for Climate Emergency and Resident Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the Council chamber, Councillor, so you said that I was afraid that, sorry, I'll start again. I asked Councillor Kerr in this Council chamber, she said that I'm afraid that I need to finish my statement by raising an issue, and that is the issue of poor behaviour. We have been told about some instances of behaviour in the past of councillors, and I mean councillors, and she used the word plural, towards officers, and this has fallen short of the expected standard we would expect. I want to take this opportunity to remind you that all councillors should treat officers with respect in this council chamber and in their correspondence with them. Robust discussion are perfectly possible without descending into bullying and harassment. Please make sure that you do not cross this line. There have been relatively few complaints about councillors' behaviour in this council chamber compared to many. We would like that to continue. You say we have been told of instances. Who are the we? The plural is also used, which implies that there are more than one councillor. And according to elected councillors, of bullying and harassing officers without any evidence in a formal public arena is insulting to all 54 councillors in this chamber. and I would, and it really brings this chamber into disrepute. My question simply is, should Councillor Kerr not apologise in public for this statement? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan. The purpose of my statement was to remind all councillors of our obligations under the Member Code of Conduct, which requires all of us to treat the public officers and other members with respect, not to bully or harass, and generally to maintain the highest standards of conduct and behaviour as elected representatives of our community. Formal complaints of alleged breaches of the Member Code of Conduct are a matter for the Standards Committee, which receives regular updates on complaints at its meetings. As I said in my statement, it is encouraging to note that Wokingham Borough Council has relatively few formal complaints, certainly compared to other councils. However, there are also instances which I've witnessed, while not leading to formal complaints, do fall short of the standards we aspire to. I make no apology for reiterating these standards to which we all sign up.
Thank you. Councillor Karen. Karen, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Madam Mayor. One has to understand, to make a statement in this chamber with any strength of feeling must mean somebody had given you that information. The Constitution, badly aligned as it is, or misaligned as it is, does set out very, very clearly that if it's an officer has a problem with a member on bullying, he reports that matter to the monitoring officer and he deals with it in the normal procedures. There is no constitutional procedure for a member of the ruling executive of this council to stand up and criticise members, more than one members, of bullying and harassing officers. And I think if she thinks she shouldn't resign, I think she's got it wrong. It's all the more reason she should resign. It's a dreadful thing to have done.
As there was no question there to answer, that was a statement. Do you have a question?
Sorry. Sorry, Councillor Harriott, you've had your supplementary. So can I move on? Because we've only got 30 minutes this item.
Yeah, I accept that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Councillor Abdul Lloyd to ask a question, the Executive Member for Health and Wellbeing and Adult Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. After all the concerns raised by residents over the past 18 months about access to GP appointments, what is the coalition doing to keep the pressure on GPs and their PCS to make more face-to-face appointments and more surgery space available to our ever-increasing local population?
Thank you, Councillor Loyes. When my wife saw this question and shared it with some of her GP colleagues, I won't tell you the answer that they got. They work very hard. And the GPs in the borough are, we don't directly commission GPs in the borough, that is the ICB. But we work closely with our partners to make sure that we get the best from GPs that we can for the residents of Woking. The GPs in the borough are offering more appointments on average than prior to the pandemic. The data from Bob, that's the Berkshire, Oxfordshire, West Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire NHS situation that we're in, shows that approximately 2/3 of primary care appointments provided in Woking over the past 6 months took place face-to-face. The average was 65.3% over the 6 months. And GPs now, I'll be quite honest, work far harder than in the past. But that means that there are very few GPs who in fact work a full week due to the pressure of the job. And getting GPs and staff in Woking is incredibly hard due to the funding being so bad for Woking. We're healthy and wealthy, so we don't get funded. It's also a fact that secondary care is now delegating much patient care to surgeries. As people I know who are GPs see this as a very positive move, but it does give them an increased workload. In order to try and improve access to primary care, there have been several initiatives. Health colleagues have been working to expand the primary care network through recruitment of pharmacists, paramedics, nurse physicians, associates and mental health practitioners so creating additional capacity and reducing the pressure on core staff. Primary care staff are referring patients to community pharmacies for minor illness.
Sorry, Councillor Hare, you're out of time. Sorry, Councillor Abdul-Lloyd, do you have a supplementary question? Thank you.
Yes, I do have, Madam Mayor. I understand that Health Watch was so concerned about feedback received about Wokingham Medical Centre. They have conducted their own consultation. Will the executive inform us of their findings and what assistance they can offer Wokingham Medical Centre and other local practices which are underperforming?
Thank you. And yes, I encourage Health Watch to look at Wokingham and look at the Wokingham Centre, and they have done, and the results will be made known to everyone. Health Watch, I think, would like to come and do a presentation, and certainly we'll make sure that underperforming practices are encouraged to do better.
Thank you. Councillor Laura Blumenthal to ask a question of the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nightingale Road roundabout floods badly every time it rains, and this council has been investigating this issue with Thames Water for a long time. Please can you let us know when this issue will be fixed?
Thank you, Laura, for your question. I do appreciate that residents are frustrated about the persistent flooding in this location and the time it is taking to resolve the matter. The council's regular clearance of its gullies in the area and our initial investigations have indicated that the cause of the repeated flooding on the roundabout is most likely to result in a blockage in the Thames Water surface water sewer network. Unfortunately, the council is unable to investigate or work on the surface water sewer, which is solely the responsibility of Thames Water. We have been raising this matter regularly with Thames Water for a number of months, and on the 8th of March, we escalated the matter within Thames Water in an attempt to get some action. Whilst we aren't able to provide a date for when they will investigate and address the issue, we can reassure you that we will continue to chase them for a prompt resolution.
Thank you, Councillor. Have you got a supplementary?
I do. Thank you so much for that response. I have been raising this issue since 2016, so it seems as if Thames Water have been not the most forthcoming. So do you think it might be wise for us to have a meeting with officers and Thames Water, and would you support that and help to organise that with me?
What I will be doing tomorrow, if we have not received anything from Thames Water, I myself will be writing to the as an executive member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways directly to Thames Water's directors.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Rance to ask the question of Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
A petition signed by 1,800 residents to stop development at Hall Farm was handed to the council in December last year. The leader of the council accepted it and took the trouble to have himself photographed taking receipt. Now the petitioners have been told that they can't have a debate at full council on the grounds it would force members of the planning committee to take a stance on a planning decision. However, there have been examples where council has debated petitions on planning decisions before. In January 2019, a debate was held on a petition relating to south of Cutbush Lane, with planning committee members leaving the room. Can the leader explain why it was possible to have a debate then, but not now?
First of all, apologies, Jackie, that you're not being answered by the person you asked the question to, but we'll have to put up, I'm afraid, with this substitute. Thank you for your question. First, I want to acknowledge and thank residents who put significant effort in organising the petition. I can confirm that executive members have seen the petition and they're aware of the strength of local feeling. I must, however, correct an important point that you make. The council is unable to debate the petition, not because it would force members of the planning committee to be put in a position where they might be accused of predetermination, But because a debate on the petition would put all councillors in a position where they might disqualify themselves from voting on the final version of the local plan on the grounds that they had already made their mind up before seeing all the evidence. It's important to note that the whole council decides on the final version of the local plan. The planning committee decides only on planning applications. I should add that developers and landowners of sites in the draft local plan will be looking out for any signs that decisions made on the local plan are political rather than based on sound assessment of relevant planning considerations. If they are given any reason to doubt that the process has been based on sound planning assessments, they will have the opportunity to raise their objections with the inspector at the public inquiry stage of the local plan process. If the inspector accepts their argument that the plan is tainted by political considerations and not based on sound planning assessments, the inspector can order us to redo the plan with all the consequences that further delay will produce.
Thank you. Councillor Rance, do you have a supplementary?
Yes. Isn't the truth of the matter that the Liberal Democrats have acted to ensure that they wouldn't have the embarrassment of debating this petition right before voters have their say at the local elections?
No, that is not the truth. I've told you the truth. I'm not in the habit of not telling the truth, and I do resent that accusation greatly. That is an appalling slur, and I would give you the opportunity to withdraw it now.
Thank you. Moving on, I've got Councillor Michael Firminger to ask a question of the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Residents in my ward are concerned about pollution in the Thames. Sonning is synonymous with the beautiful winding river and the wildlife that live along it. Can you tell me what powers the council has to stop sewage from Thames water entering our stretch of river?
Thank you, Michael. We fully share your residents' concern about pollution in the Thames. Sadly, the Borough Council does not itself have powers to regulate the discharge of foul water into the river. That regulatory body is, on a national basis, the Environment Agency. In theory, the Environment Agency advises water companies to take actions to investigate, monitor and reduce the impacts of the environment on the environment of such discharges from sewage treatment works, but unfortunately this seems to have little effect on Thames water. They discharge sewage so frequently they have introduced a near real-time map on their website showing when overflows occurred and for how long. This council is totally opposed to Thames Water being able to put raw sewage into rivers, but sadly I can only recommend that you contact your constituency MP or your residents' constituency MP, Theresa May. But I would caution you that on the 20th of October 2021, she voted in Parliament to allow water companies to continue to dump sewage into rivers, just 3 days after attending a community clean-up event on the Thames in Sonning. She was accompanied through the lobby by members for Wokingham and for Bracknell Forest. But if residents do spot a pollution incident, they can report it by using the Environment Agency 24-hour incident line. Excuse me.
Thank you. Councillor Firminger, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I do with that. It's very interesting. Thank you for that response. I'm actually in the process of writing to the Environment Agency and indeed Thames Water as well. It's part of a three-pronged attack on them to do something about it, because I don't want to have all the muck in there, and it's obviously a health hazard as well. But I did read in the paper that a leader of the council was meeting with Thames Water and asking residents to contact him with their concerns. However, the leader didn't contact councillors with the Thames in their area, which I thought a bit strange. I'm just really wondering if he had done that, then we could have perhaps lobbied together with the leader, Thames Water, and we can do that together. I mean, it's something we can do. I appreciate we might not have the power, but why can't we lobby? and be a bit of a pain.
I can't comment on what the leader of the council said, but I'd be happy to put my signature to your letter and join you in a cross-party attack on Thames Water.
Yeah, I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Norman Jorgensen to ask a question of the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At the Budget Council, Councillor Ian Shenton described a petition signed by 1,779 residents on waste collection as spurious. Will he apologise to residents for his disregard of their views?
I described your petition as spurious, Councillor, not the views of residents, and I most certainly have not disregarded their views, quite the opposite. Let me define spurious for you. Not being what it purports to be, says the OED, and your petition met that definition because the signatures were not garnered to inform the Council of Residents' views, which we already knew from our consultation that obtained the views in much larger numbers. They were garnered instead to further your political aims, and that's glaringly obvious because you garnered those signatures through a welter of misrepresentation and falsehoods. 1 week it was going to cost £7 million, then another week it was going to cost £4 million, then it would save no money for many years, if ever. Total fiction. The plain fact is that in our consultation, the option that we are pursuing was liked by 24% of residents, accepted by 43%, while 7% were neutral and 26% did not support it. Yet even tonight, you deliberately and maliciously misrepresent that as 76% of residents who responded to the Council's consultation on future waste collection did not like the idea. So, Councillor, it's you that's disregarding the views of residents, and it's you that should apologise.
Thank you. Councillor Norman Jorgensen, do you have a supplementary? Thank you.
Yes, I do. I seem to be getting a lot of personal insults from Mr. Shenton this evening. Thank you very much. So, residents will note there was a total absence of an apology there. It speaks volumes about his attitude. We know this administration isn't interested in the views of local people. We've heard it on parking, on elections, and now on waste. And for your interest, we started our petition long before you started the consultation, so it wasn't that way around, it was the other way around. So why should residents bother to take part in a Lib Dem consultation ever again?
I answered that question on Tuesday night at Executive.
Thank you. Councillor Rebecca Margetts, would you like to ask your question? The Executive Member for Children's Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted that the Conservative government has announced funding for new SEND schools in Woking Borough. However, I'm surprised that the Liberal Democrat coalition administration has identified Rooksnest Farm in Finchampstead as a potential site for the new school. Why build on green fields when there are far more sustainable sites available?
Thank you for your question. This location is within walking distance of bus routes serving Lower Earley, Shinfield, Arborfield, Finchampstead, Crowthorne and Wokingham, and is accessible by sustainable modes of transport such as cycling and walking from surrounding communities. Most importantly, though, it will enable a higher proportion of Wokingham students with special educational needs to be educated in the borough, so reducing the length of their journey to school. This new SEND school is urgently needed. The site belongs to the council, which will enable us to deliver the school more quickly than if we had to wait to negotiate with another landowner. Even so, it will still take several years to deliver it. Other options have been considered. It has been suggested that a developer in the south of the borough may be prepared to provide land for a SEND school in place of the primary school they're expected to provide. But quite apart from taking longer to implement, using that land for a SEND school would mean we lose a primary school site with significant knock-on effects for future primary provision. The old Farley Hill school site has also been suggested, but has now been announced that is going to be used for Addington expansion. And finally, I am slightly surprised you suggest the choices between Greenfields and Ascend School. Can I remind you that the Conservatives identified the whole of Rooks Nest as a site suitable for development in the draft local plan update, and we're intending to build 270 houses on it. The actual choice is therefore between 270 houses on the whole of Rooks Nest with the Conservatives, or using just part of it for Ascend School to help some of the most vulnerable children in the borough with the Lib Dems, and as Lindsay reminds me, using another part of it for the COVID Memorial Wood.
Thank you. Councillor Rebecca Maggots, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. The COVID wood is actually a very small proportion of Rooks Nest. It's 7.7 hectares out of 40 plus hectares. The Liberal Democrat candidates actually promised residents that they would fight to stop any development at the last election in Rooks Nest Farm in exchange for their votes. We now know that this is yet another broken promise from this administration. Will you listen to residents and reconsider these plans?
I find that quite a remarkable statement from somebody whose party was proposing to build all over the entire site. We need Ascend School, and I think residents would prefer us to cater for some of the most vulnerable children in our borough than to build 270 houses.
Thank you. Thank you. We're now moving on to item on the agenda 127, minutes of the committee meetings and ward matters. We have 20 minutes, please. Please raise your hands if you wish to ask a question. Keep them up until we get everybody. Thank you. Everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just Graham.
Thank you. Put your hands down. Can we have Councillor Graham Howe first of all, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The question is for Councillor Fishwick. The executive member mailed me on the 17th of November 2022 and said that due to a change in current resource within the traffic management team, we're having to review and reprioritise the workload which related to the traffic management, speeding and parking in Wargrave. There's a great deal of growing discontent in my ward, and on this lack of action, and it was an initiative that was instigated by the Conservative administration 18 months ago. Furthermore, the executive member was unable to accept any responsibility in his radio interview with my residents, Chris Cordray and Meg Rosen, on Radio Berkshire. There have been consultations, at least 2, with Wargrave Parish Council. The objections not to increase the hours in the School Lane car park, which will decimate the high street, have been ignored. The motion passed by the executive last evening to take on moving traffic offences includes 11 areas, but no mention or any progress on the measures for Remenham, Ruscombe or Wargrave.
Sorry, can you ask your question, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
I timed it, I think. Could the executive member please advise what communication I should make to my residents that is proactive, given that he's got active in his title?
Thank you for your question. The review was because there was a large number of schemes which needed to go through the full assessment which were currently on the list for delivery coming forward, and they needed to be designed. That's why I changed the emphasis on those. We need to start getting things designed up and delivered on site and going through the consultation process. Those were the highest priority schemes, such as Rose Street in Wokingham, which has been around for quite some time. Molly Miller's Lane, also in Wokingham. So those focuses have been on that. We are now starting to deliver Rose Street, and we are going to deliver Molly Miller's Lane in June. That's a crossing across that particular location. The radio interview on BBC Radio Berkshire was about speeding traffic going through Wargrave. Speeding traffic is something which we work with on the police, but they carry out the enforcement of that. The particular scheme which you have alluded to in Wargrave is something within the assessments list, and it will be looked at when it comes up. But the first emphasis was starting to get delivery on site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Cornish, please.
Thank you very much. My question is again for the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. The verge on Longwater Road in Finch Hampstead has long degenerated into an eyesore, principally due to some inconsiderate use by one or two of the residents. Not only has the verge deteriorated into a large patch of mud in places, but parked vehicles are now providing an obstruction to people entering onto the highway from neighbouring sub-roads. After a considerable number of months, I received news yesterday, hopefully coincidentally, that the Highways Group have now actually taken ownership of that verge from the estates team. That being the case, can I ask the Executive Member that some urgency is now applied to resolving the problem?
Thank you, David, for your question. Yes, Longwater Road, Finch Hampstead. There was two parcels of land. One part, mainly the carriageway, was highway, and parts of the verges were owned by WBC Commercial Properties. I had to sign an approval notice together with Clive Jones for the process to make that into adopted highway. That process has now been completed, so all the legal complexities have been completed, and the traffic management team are now going to assess the location to see what yellow lines are required to go in that particular location, and that will be included in Amendment 6.
Thank you. Councillor John Halsall, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. Can I ask a question of the leader of the council or his deputy? I think it's a deputy. May I refer to the borough's coat of arms? Out of the coronet rises a grassy mound on which stands a royal lion holding an oar, representing Henry Royal Regatta, the jewel in the borough's crown, an international event which matches Ascot and Wimbledon in its importance. It is televised throughout the world. Henley Royal Regatta is over 10 days. Some 500,000 people flock to Remenham to watch it. Henley is not a single event, but many events happening at the same time. Whilst there is a private enclosures, most of the course is public. The council has ensured the provision of public toilets and litter picking of the towpath. I understand that this will no longer be the case, but I can find no reference to it in the MTFP or a business case. The last time there were no public toilets, all accessible land was used, the church village...
Excuse me, sorry, you're a bit out of time and you haven't really asked a question, so do you want to sum up quickly?
Yes, I'll ask a question. There is no litter picking planned. Is the coalition determined to literally trash the council's reputation, not only locally, but now internationally as well?
I'm not entirely sure I got the question. I heard a lot of discussion, or rather a lot of comment on the importance of the Henley Royal Regatta, which I can't help but note.
Can I clarify? You've scrapped the litter picking, and
Sorry,
and
excuse me.
Waste.
Excuse me,
Toilet.
sorry, you had a minute or two to ask your question. Would you like to put it in writing to Councillor Conway?
I will attempt to just briefly comment, if I may. I can't give you an answer as full as you would like, and I will undertake to get you a written response, John. But I would remind you the Henley Royal Regatta, although clearly it has an impact on Remenham, it also has an impact on Henley, which is a different local authority.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Croy, please.
Well done, and thank you for getting my name right that time. So my question has been sent to me by Councillor Boyd, who's unable to make it this evening, and she says one of the characteristics in our ward is that we have many lovely green...
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt for a second. We have a mic still on. John Horsell, thank you.
So we have many verges, and we have many people who wish to add extensions to their houses. Often the verges end up totally ruined by the builders, and very rarely are they brought back to their original condition, and it ruins the look of the area. So my question is to the member for planning, or the executive member for planning: will you seek to meet with officers, and perhaps with Shirley as well, to find out, see if we can build in some sort of consistent condition in householder planning applications whereby people are required to bring verges back to their original condition?
Yes, I've got to stand up. Yes, certainly. If you want to send me the details, I'll see what we can do. And if you want a meeting, we will discuss.
Thank you. Can we, before we carry on, can I remind people to ask the question so he'll actually answer it? So can I have Councillor Keith Baker to ask his question, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for Councillor Fishwick. It relates to a request for parking solutions on Haddon Drive and Rowan Drive during the football season. In August 2021, following extensive lobbying from local residents, the Town Council and myself, an agreement was reached that it would be included in a future amendment TRO. Town Council, who actually submitted the request, even had a confirmation email from the system saying the request was in. It did not appear in that amendment. We were informed it got lost. So the opportunity to get it into Amendment 5 was lost. We're now in March 2023. We will have to wait for Amendment 6 to have it included, which realistically, using the time it took to process Amendment 5, means it's unlikely to get anywhere near implementation until the end of this year, 2023. That is a 2-year gap between agreement with a highways officer to proceed with the request and possible implementation. The process is clearly broken.
Sorry, Councillor Baker.
I'm doing my question now.
I'm sorry, it's too late. You're out of time. Thank you. Would you like to put it in written to...
What's the point?
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Maria G, please.
Thank you. My question is about the meeting on Thursday, the 23rd of February 2023, which was an individual member decision. I was pleased to see that there was an A-board policy put forward at this meeting and approved. It's great to have one. I've been banging on about this for 3 years, so it's quite good that this administration has finally got themselves together and actually done it. Tried for 2 years before that. I just want to know, because some compromises have been made, whether there's an appropriate compromise between the needs of business and the needs of those who are visually and sight impaired to proceed along the pavement. Thank you.
I believe we have found a compromise. We will monitor it and we will make sure, because obviously the needs of business to advertise legitimately their business, and also the needs of pedestrians to be able to have a fairly free passage along the pavement. But we'll monitor it and we will see what happens with time.
Thank you. Councillor Charles Maggetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a question for Councillor Shenton. It's specifically about Range Road in my ward, which is a byway. My resident contacted me concerned about the surface and state of it, and we had a productive meeting with the Rights of Way officers last week, where they committed to actually do repairs on it and on Tintagel Road in Finchampstead. However, during the discussion, it turned out basically that their funding expires next year. At the end of this financial year, they have no further funding. They gave me commitments that they do Roman Ride and Heath Ride in my ward basically next year. I realise all of this happened before Councillor Shenton's been in his post, but could I ask him if he would work with officers to arrange funding so they can carry out their list of commitments to the residents of Finchampstead North and wider?
I will take a very close look at that. I'm familiar with Roman Ride, but I'm not familiar with the was it Range Road you said?
Range Road. I can send you an email with further details.
Lovely.
If that helps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor David Hare, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In Early, there are quite a few hazards of multiple occupation, and we went to find out whether all these are licensed and found that some of them aren't. And I want to know whether we can make sure that all the houses of multiple occupation are licensed so that we can work with them in the area. I'm not sure.
Yes, we've been looking at HMOs over the last few months, and if you want to contact me about the specific ones, I'll take them up. But it is an area of significant concern.
Councillor Abdul Lloyds, please.
Thank you. I'm not sure which executive member. I was intent to put my question with Clive, but as Clive's not here, maybe Stephen Conway. Right. In the form of Sandford Farmstead in the airfield part of my ward, there has been a spate of keyless car thefts and number of burglaries have been steadily rising. While this is ultimately a police matter, I believe the Borough Council has a part to play in this. This especially so when it comes to communications of how to prevent these things happening and how to get support to those victims when it happens. I have noted a large increase in communication activities around a whole host of special days dedicated to a particular topic, but have not seen much, if any, similar campaigns around this issue. Can you tell me what joint up thinking and communication are happening with the police?
Thank you for your question, Abdul. I think the problem you're describing is, of course, much wider than your ward. It's a problem that many people are afflicted with across the borough and across the country. I would like, if this is appropriate to you, to meet to discuss this in a little bit more detail. I'd like to get a bit more sense of your ideas about how we might be able to improve things. So if you'd like to send me an email, we'll set up a meeting time to discuss this.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Dennis, please.
This is a question for the Executive Member for Finance. I'm asking a question on the minutes of the audit committee that occurred in February and the associated risk register that came with it. I note the risk register that the Conservative voting solution looking for a problem voting suppression bill unsurprisingly has a bunch of risks associated with it, including disenfranchisement and additional administrative burdens. I note that there is a mitigation plan of local communication to deal with this poor and unnecessary legislation, which of course will cost the council money. What plans does the council have to record the impact of this legislation, especially associated costs, turnout, and the changes in the demographics of the said turnout?
Thank you. Sorry, we're nearly running out of time, so hold on. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Do you want me to speak?
Yeah, sorry. Please do.
Yes, right. Thank you. I'm going to remember to face this way because the microphone's this way. But thank you for your question, Councillor Dennis.
Basically, our returning officer has a duty to produce a report for the Electoral Commission after the elections, and he also produces a report that comes here to this council, and hopefully that include the data from the voter ID. We've also been given a grant, but it's a woefully inadequate grant to fund the changes for this election. But I'm hoping that this report will contain the information that you're asking for and the details of the grants that we have received when it appears after the election.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We have running out of time, but I have one last question. If Councillor Laura Barrington would like to ask hers. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is the Executive Member for Highways. I wanted to ask you about the early train station footbridge, which begins in my ward and a lot of my residents rely on to commute. And I know that we've been part of meetings to discuss maintenance of the bridge, and I just wanted to get the latest. Is there planned maintenance of the bridge upcoming? What is it? When is it going to happen? I understand you won't have specifics to hand, but an approximation would be useful in itself.
Thank you, Laura, for your question. Assessments have been done on the bridge, including the ramps. The ramps have a significantly lesser life expectancy remaining compared to the span across the A3290 and the railway. So the focus now is to replace the ramps. They are also checking the footings to make sure the footings will also take the loadings for a lifespan of 20 plus years. And when we get that information later on, probably during the summer, we'll be able to update ward members as well as town council members either side.
Thank you. We're now moving on to item 128, statements by the leader and executive members. We have 20 minutes for this, so please raise your hands if you'd like to speak. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Can Councillor Ian Shenton please start? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to confirm that Rooks Nest Farm has been approved as the site of the borough's COVID Memorial Woodland. The idea from Councillor Clive Jones and with cross-party support is to create a peaceful woodland area for quiet contemplation by those who lost loved ones to COVID. It will consist of substantial tree planting interspersed with wildflower areas, pathways and benches. Effectively an extension of California Country Park, it will be able to take advantage of the park's existing infrastructure of parking, toilets and cafe, thereby mitigating the cost to the council in these financially challenging times. It also means the site will no longer be considered for the 270 houses previously planned there. It's expected to be feasible to plant the site in the planting season that will start this autumn.
Sorry, Councillor Shenton. Sorry, Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Standing Order 4.2.13.16, a response from an officer. My recollection was before the Liberal Democrats took control of this council that Gregor Murray suggested that there was going to be a tree, which was a motion at council. I wonder if an officer could possibly confirm that to me.
Sorry.
And I know they won't know now. Maybe they could confirm it in writing.
I'll take advisement. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We will follow that up with writing if you're happy with that. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Ian Shenton, would you like to continue? Thank you.
I've finished, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking in my capacity as Deputy Leader, standing in for the Leader. And as the municipal year draws to a close and the election campaign starts, I think it's pretty clear that it started this evening. This is a good moment to thank all those who've helped to improve life for members of our community since May 2022. Included in my thanks are my executive colleagues and the senior officers who have supported them so well. But I want also to express my gratitude to non-executive councillors of all parties for their contribution on council committees, boards and working parties, and to all of our hard-working council officers whose dedication to public service should be recognised and properly appreciated. Outside the council, I want to thank all our partner organisations, the town and parish councils, the voluntary and charitable sector, local businesses, educators at all levels, health providers, the police and fire service. And I want, with my affordable and social housing executive member hat on, to register my particular appreciation of the work of Steve Bowers and the other tenant volunteers who make TLIP so effective and so enjoyable. Thank you all for playing your part in helping to make the borough an even better place to live and work.
Thank you. Councillor Prue-Bray, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to be able to announce that the Council's bid to be included in the Safety Valve programme has been accepted. A Safety Valve is a programme of support for those councils with the most challenging deficits on special educational needs and disabilities. The agreement we have made with the Department of Education commits us to a very demanding SEND improvement programme over a number of years, which will require substantial investment from the Council. But in return, we will receive a total of 20 million over the lifetime of the agreement to help us reduce the deficit. The first payment of 8 million is due before the end of the current financial year, and it will allow us to almost halve the accumulated deficit which has built up since 2017. Our safety valve plans include new SEND provision in the borough, which is very badly needed. I'm very pleased to announce that we have been successful in our bids for new special schools. We have been awarded not just one, 2 schools. Only 33 schools were awarded in total, and only 3 authorities were granted 2 schools, the other 2 being much bigger than us. These schools will take several years to build and open, but will in time make a real difference for our children, as well as for our spending, with fewer children having to travel long distances to expensive out-of-borough schools. This is excellent news for Wokingham residents, and especially for those parents whose children have special educational needs. And I would like to thank officers for all their hard work on both Safety Valve and the school bids, and congratulate them on their success in getting such critically important projects over the line. And finally, I would ask Council to note that despite all the pressures on school places this year, the percentage of children who were offered a place at one of their preferred secondary schools for September has actually increased to 95.63%, a higher percentage than in any of the 3 preceding years. I don't underestimate the frustration or upset that not getting a place at one of your preferred schools can cause, but I would like to place on record that the percentage of parents and children adversely affected this year is in fact lower than it has been for some time.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Kerr, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been quite a year, and one of the key highlights for me has been the establishment and development of strategic partnerships. These partnerships allow for mutual benefit, not just for the council and our partner organisations, but our communities as well. I'd like to thank my colleague Stephen Conway, who has been the driving force behind this for our administration, and the team of officers who have worked so incredibly hard on progressing this. The work that is underway in terms of developing the community vision in complete partnership with businesses, community groups, forums and the voluntary sector is a new and exciting way of working for us and of the utmost importance. The first of those partnerships I wanted to mention is with the Polehampton Trust. I'm thrilled that the contractor has been appointed to start work on the old Polehampton Boys' School to convert this heritage asset into Twyford's permanent library and community hub. After many years of campaigning by the local community, it is fitting that we're able to provide the community with this asset as the Polehampton Trust reaches its 300-year anniversary. I'd like to thank my colleagues, the Polehampton Trust, and in particular the late Dave Turner for making this happen. The second of those partnerships is in the form of a new arts and culture forum. Following an event held in the autumn of last year that brought businesses and cultural organisations together, we have facilitated the setup and are a member of a new arts and culture forum. There is a huge opportunity to put Wokingham Borough on the map in terms of arts and culture, and the benefits are multiple, including intrinsic, social and economic value. We are at the start of a collaborative, exciting journey. In terms of our environment, the third partnership I wanted to highlight is with Freely Fruity, who are now on site on land that sits alongside what will be Barkham Solar Farm. Freely Fruity are a community orchard charity who've acquired land to propagate new saplings for future orchards. The fruit will help feed our communities and the trees will help with both our biodiversity and climate commitments. Then we have the partnership established with the other Berkshire local authorities that has meant that we can launch a Solar Together scheme this spring. The scheme, which is run by a company called iChooser, will allow our residents to group buy solar PV for their homes. We will work with the company to help promote the scheme, and our residents will benefit from economies of scale and the fact that installers will be fully vetted, giving residents peace of mind. Whilst this is a group buy scheme, each property will be individually assessed and quotes tailored accordingly. Finally, I wanted to highlight the fantastic internal partnerships that we have, and in particular between our climate, energy and housing teams. I'm absolutely thrilled tonight to announce that we have been successful in securing just shy of £300,000 from the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which will allow us to help make home improvements to our social housing stock. We will be match funding, and together this investment will benefit our tenants immensely through reduced energy costs and greater energy security. And I'd like to thank officers who worked so hard to secure this.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to announce that following the queries which Councillor Rachel Burgess raised last year about spending of the Council's Local Welfare Provision Fund, having considered how we can better ensure residents who desperately need this money for essential furnishing for their homes can access funds, we have transferred the delivery of the scheme and the associated funding for this year to Wokingham United Charities. Residents who live on low incomes and who are either moving into a new property or have an essential item such as an oven brake often don't have the money to pay for household basics and no way to transport large items. This means that they risk getting into debt to pay for essential household items and will have to go without absolute basics. A local charity has had to appeal for beds for children this month after reporting that children are sleeping on cardboard boxes here in Wokingham. The Local Welfare Provision Fund was meant to pay for this kind of one-off help, but as we've discovered in previous years, a lot of this funding hasn't been claimed, despite being greatly needed by residents. This year, therefore, we're transferring the management of the fund to our partner, Wokingham United Charities, who have close links with local people in need and will be able to distribute this funding to those who need it. This shows again how working with our Hardship Alliance partners is crucial for getting assistance to those who need it most, and how effective cross-party working, putting residents first, can help us to make better decisions. I would also like to say thank you to the officers from the finance team and from the team working on tackling poverty for doing the work to get us there. Finally, I wanted to say, if you are a resident who needs help in these difficult times, please do get in touch through One Front Door or directly to one of our local charities. Wokingham United Charities are giving one-off grants, Share are working hard to get furniture and other household basics to residents, and First Days, as I mentioned earlier, providing children with beds. Many people are having to ask for a helping hand this year who haven't needed help before, so please do come forward if you need assistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubay.
One day, okay. It has been quite a year for this council financially, with unprecedented pressures coming from a combination of the war in Europe, Brexit and recovering from COVID. We were still able to find nearly 12 million in revenue savings to adjusted our capital programme to produce a balanced budget. And unlike the previous administration, we did not end up raiding the general fund reserves without a plan for making repayments. However, it could have been worse. Slough Borough Council residents are facing a council tax increase of 9.99% due to their historical mismanagement of their finances. We continue to distribute grants that we have provided for hardship to our residents, as Rachel alluded to, and those most in need. And on top of this, we've been able to find extra funding to help more people in Woking Borough than ever before. I would certainly say that this has been a successful, financially responsible and compassionate approach to our council finances, which has been achieved. One of our more recent benefits was the £400 energy support grant that residents in homes bands A to D successfully received late last year. There are also some residents who are eligible in the higher council tax bands. One recent example is the extension of this energy support grant, which is where households who previously were not eligible for energy support grants are now able to claim. This was usually because they were not directly connected to the gas or electricity grid, such as living on a boat or in a managed residential park home. I urge all of our residents who are in this category and were not able to claim before to please come forward and claim what they are due. As this is the last meeting of the year, I wish to thank all of those who contributed to our scrutiny committees to helping with the budget setting process, and I particularly want to thank Rachel Burgess, the leader of the Labour Party group, for being chair of our audit committee and doing so responsibly and with good grace. I can see that there has been a lot of good work done in that area, and I hope that it will continue.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Fishwick, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Extra money. It was welcome news that the government have finally listened to the Local Government Association and the highway industry and provided some funding for pothole repairs to the local highway network, in which Wokingham has been awarded 589,200. However, this is a drop in the ocean when the alarm survey published on Tuesday this week now shows a growing backlog of 14 billion of road repairs across England and Wales, up from 12.6 billion last year. The new money can be spent on preventative maintenance, and this is what is intended rather than simply filling potholes, which is short term. This is a government that has and continues to underinvest in local highway maintenance. The extra funding received will all be invested in our local highway network during this year on preventative maintenance, unlike the previous Conservative administration that didn't and squirreled it away. Talking of potholes, the average number of potholes reported between 2019, 2020 and 2021-22 was 2,179. During this financial year, they have decreased, yes, decreased, to a forecasted 1,500. So potholes are not getting worse since the Lib Dems took over. They are getting less, significantly less. We have also set up a system to charge insurance companies for damage to highway property. The previous Conservative administration had nothing in place, and the council taxpayer picked up the bill for the repairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 129, statements from council-owned companies. We have 10 minutes and you can speak for 3 if anyone wishes to. Councillor David Hare, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to give you some information about Optalis, which is going from strength to strength, and it's worked with WEC to open a range of new services in Wokingham this year. The intention was to phase this service launch. This has not worked out entirely as had been intended, but even with a lot happening all at once, the team has been managing very well. And the working relationship between Optalis and the Wokingham commissioners and social workers is good and is certainly being productive in all that it does. All of these additional services and functions which Optalis has taken on during 2022 seems to be operating very well. Optalis now has more than 50 different services and 800 members of staff, equating to an overall growth in the operations of 33% in 9 months. This has been achieved without any increase in central management resources. Is a tribute to the hard work, commitment and dedication of the existing team. And it should also be noted that all CQC regulated services remain at 100% as good. Optalis is continuing to look to remodel certain services, such as the day services, and are developing the next phase in their modernisation plan for community lives. focusing on overall offer and how TARS might be able to offer availability of service 7 days a week, as well as to younger cohort of people who are currently not serviced very well, and also going out in the evenings and times like that, living a normal life. Optalis is working well. It is growing. It is developing. There have been problems. Everyone knows the staffing problems and things like that. But it is going forward, and we in Adult Services are very pleased with how it's going forward and all that it's doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now moving on to the motion 499. I've had notification from Shirley Boyd, Councillor Shirley Boyd, that Rachel Burgess will be the proposer. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Do you wish to speak for 3 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The pandemic brought to the fore how valued our key workers are. While many of us were protecting ourselves in our homes during lockdown, our key workers were out in the community doing essential jobs and providing us and our residents with essential services. Many clapped our key workers during the pandemic, but now we have the situation where teachers or nurses are resorting to food banks as they can't afford to feed their families. Of course, it can be particularly hard in Woking Borough as the cost of living here is so high. As a borough council, we should do all we can to support our key workers because it is the right thing to do and because we desperately need those key workers. As the motion states, there are numerous vacancies across the NHS, care work, social work and in our schools. We should be doing everything we can to attract these essential workers to live and work in Woking Borough. The motion calls for a review of one element where we as a council could better support our key workers, and that is housing. The motion calls for a full review of housing for key workers, including a review of the income threshold, a review of the definition of key workers in terms of eligibility, and a review to enable the provision of key worker homes at social, not just affordable rents. The motion does not commit the council to any financial outlay. It calls for a review. So I hope all members can support this important motion this evening in support of our care workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any members wish to speak against this motion? Thank you. Then we can go straight to the vote. Those in for the recommendation, please raise your hands. Against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. Motion is carried. Thank you. I'm now moving on to motion 500 proposed by Andy Croy. Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Would you like to speak for 3 minutes, Councillor Croy?
Thank you very much, as you dodged the whole Andrew conundrum there. Well done. So, Madam Mayor, thank you. I'm not going to talk for 3 minutes. It's a very, very simple motion. We have all experienced that feeling where we want a crossing or some sort of road safety improvement done on a ward. We think it's done. We found out other stuff is being done in advance. We don't know the reasons. This evening, we've had a classic example. Poor old Graham over there. He thinks something's being done in Walgrave. He's been told it's being done in Walgrave, and it's not being done. He doesn't know why. We need to get a bit more transparency in the council. Last year, we had his ward colleague wandering around Norris, looking at roads, saying, "Yep, I'll whack a crossing in there for you." It wasn't going to happen. We know it's not going to happen. We can't have that sort of sense that these crossings are done by favours. We've seen the frustration of the people who live down at in Montague Park. You know, they need to know why the things that they want done aren't being done. And the best way, I think, for all members is to get the information out in the public so that we can refer to it, we can point our residents to it. So hopefully people will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak against the motion? Thank you very much. Then we can go straight to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Carried. Last motion carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening. That finishes the evening's agenda. I'd like to wish you all good night and thank you very much.